Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to this B3I webinar titled Reinsurance Administration is Broken. Why is blockchain, or DLT as it's known, the solution? My name is Red, and I'm just going to run you all quickly through the agenda that we have for today. It's an hour-long session with a 15-minute Q&A at the end. At the very start, I'm just going to do quick welcomes and introductions with our three experts from B3I. Section 2 will run through some of the pain points for the reinsurance administration. 3, the technology it's underlying, what B3I does, distributed ledger and blockchain. Then we'll get to the meat of it in section 4. What does a real solution look like? And then 5, at the end, you'll have the chance to put your questions to our experts. You can also do that throughout the webinar. You have a panel at the bottom. Some of you might be familiar with Zoom already. There's Q&A. Please drop your questions in there. If not throughout, or right at the very end, and I will remind you all again as we go throughout the session. So, quick welcome introduction to our three experts. Today we are joined by Antonio de Marzo, that's B3I's head of products. He's been with us since October 2018. Antonio has led the development of applications based on DLT, dedicated to the insurance and reinsurance market space. He's got over 10 years of experience in the industry, from both the sides of an underwriter as an operation manager, so a wealth of knowledge on this subject. We're also joined by Aris Dzakas. He's the product owner for B3I Reinsurance. Aris is currently responsible for representing the business in the development activity and maximizing the value of our products. Aris has a background from Zurich Insurance, where he worked on customer service reporting systems. And lastly, we have James Evans from our sales and business development team. James is involved in everything to do with customer engagement and support. And as well, James came from Zurich Insurance, where he spent 5 years working in claims and underwriting across London, Paris, and Zurich. Welcome, guys.
Welcome to you and welcome to everyone.
Thank you. So, first section of this, guys, I've got a question for you, and this is the format we'll take. I'd like to pose a question to you each in turn. How do you feel if I said that, broadly speaking, the internal process of reinsurance admin is massively outdated or even broken? Antonio, I'd like to turn that question to you first.
Yeah, that's, the reinsurance admin, it was at the forefront of innovation many years ago. I think there wasn't many other financial industries have been inspired by what was, the infrastructure that the reinsurance, in general, the risk transfer industry had in place. But we don't know why, but at a certain stage, there has been a kind of stagnation that happened. And so far, what we see that many industries around us, around the risk transfer industries, are moving towards the 4.0 industry. And they are, really ramping up and advancing at speed. While on the other side, we're not seeing this type of changes on the insurance and reinsurance side. We're seeing some evolution on the user experience though, but at the bottom, nothing really is changing. The industry is still driven by manual processing, and the industry is still driven by, I would say, kind of analogic management. Still, we use PDFs, right, which is a digital format, but the reality is that that specific document is an analogic format. So I think there is a lot to do there to really bring the industry again to be at the forefront of the innovation side. And I'd expect that something would really happen driven by market-wide and end-to-end initiatives with technologies that can support this type of evolution.
Thanks, Antonio. And Aris, I'd appreciate if you could give us a sort of a deep dive on what you see as some of the things that are broken in the reinsurance admin process.
Indeed, when we look at So the placement of reinsurance treaties, where you have multiple parties involved, you've got your cedent, one or more brokers, and of course multiple reinsurers. There is still a proliferation of manual and paper-based processes. Information is exchanged using different systems and in different formats because there is a lack of standardization, and that makes it hard later to reconcile the information. And then the data very often needs to be rekeyed multiple times because there is a minimal system integration, which is why the whole process in general is slow and error prone. Now, what I'm describing doesn't sound like what you would expect, right, in this day and age. And that becomes even more important when you think about where the industry is going, right? The volume of data is only going to be increasing. Think of Internet of Things and 5G technologies. And of course, the participants themselves, they also want to become more data-driven and want to focus on, becoming more data-driven and focus more on assessing the risks and driving the business insights rather than spending time and effort in administration. And this is also how B3I started, as a consortium of insurance and reinsurance companies, with a vision to transform how business is conducted and to address those inefficiencies. So there we are.
Thank you, Aris. So what I took from that is that reinsurance hasn't really kept pace with much of the other industries that we work in and work with. And it often leads to these inefficiencies. James, you're at the front with a lot of customers and you have those interactions. What's the sort of things that you're hearing? Is to their in their minds, is reinsurance administration broken?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there's a number of ways that we can measure whether it's been broken or assess whether it's been broken. The first one being it's expensive. It's super expensive to administrate and to manage reinsurance. I mean, we look at 35% in the cost ratio, so that's 35 cents in every dollar that is spent on the administration of a contract, and it's super expensive. And the market has known this for a long time, and despite various initiatives, despite an enormous amount of investing, hasn't really been able to impact the cost ratio. So that's ultimately a good assessment of whether the process is broken or not. Secondary, because not everything is about money, it's really a lot of the feedback we hear from experts in the market is that they would love to spend more activity on customer-facing activity. So for them, for an underwriter, that might be the assessment of risk. For a claims person, that might be really intimately understanding their customer and their business to understand the process of the claim, or even in accounting to really understand the exposure on a particular event or the management of cash within a business. The problem is, and the reason why it's broken, is that we spend an inordinate amount of time, too much time, on process, on manual, paper-based process, which is really distracting and taking time, energy, and resources away from the activity that the customers value and the market should be proud about. It's another way that we look at and can say that the process is broken. Finally, the final point from me on here is that the existing infrastructure in the way we do business at the moment is a massive, massive barrier to innovation. And you see this with the speed of, currently trying to innovate with the creation of new products for the pandemic. The market moves very, very slowly. And a big reason for that is due to the existing process. So on many measures, Fred, I think it's safe to say that we and many of our customers and shareholders agree that the process is broken.
Thank you, guys. That's a really good overview, I think, just in terms of the pain points that the industry faces and then the outcomes as to how that really manifests in the market. Obviously, for our audience, we just wanted to position that way. So we can move into the next section and just give a little bit of background as to why blockchain, why distributed ledger. Obviously, it's what B3I has chosen to invest in. Why is this the way forward, and how does it become a problem solver for the reinsurance market? Antonio, can you kick us off on a little bit of background for anyone who's not familiar with DLT as a whole?
Sure. First of all, it's not the only technology, right, that the industry needs to embrace in order to really transform end to end. But so far, is the technology that have expressed and demonstrated the highest potential to enable the industry to embrace this journey. Why? You know, if we look at one of the pain points that was identified before, you know, Ari saying a reinsurance contract is usually transacted between, you know, 100 parties instantaneously, and you need to have all the 100 parties in full sync. Ideally, you want to have everyone on the same page at the same time, at the cost of a single click, not at the cost of hundreds of clicks, you know, of people generating that alignment. And how can we achieve that? It's pretty simple. We can achieve that by having a centralized database, and that's done. Swift is a great example. The difference though in the reinsurance and the insurance industry is how we all available to give up data ownership. Because Swift at the moment is centralizing a very minimum set of data just to guarantee that the specific wire transfer is executed. But when we go into the insurance and reinsurance world, there is a lot of personal data that is exchanged. And underlying in every single contract, there is always an NDA agreement amongst the parties that are participating in that contract. Data must be protected. And so data cannot be centralized. And therefore, we cannot achieve with centralized database the deliverable of having everyone on the same page. But fortunately, DLT brings this type of deliverable without the need of centralizing the data in a single place. You can transact privately with multiple parties, and the technology guarantees that everyone is aligned, everyone meaning the parties that are interested and are participating in that contract. So the technology has this minimal deliverable at the core, with a set of course, enablers like, you know, the private and permissioning, the fact that the transactions are time-stamped, that there is persisting database behind, you know, transactions were executed and signed, they are immutable. So in order to execute a new transaction, you need to have the approval of the other counterparty to ensure that the contract always represents a legally binding entity for both parties and so on. But at the end, if we look at what this technology brings is the single version of the truth for the parties that are participating. It's very simple. But, you know, this single version of the truth doesn't come for free. You need an infrastructure. You need a network. We're leveraging R3 Corda as a technology behind our offering. And on top of that, we are building a network of nodes that are dedicated to the insurance and reinsurance industry. And the network is the fundamental part. You need to have a network and infrastructure behind that is capable of ensuring this type of transacting. But if any one of us in the panel, you know, and at the attendees is looking, okay, how can we achieve that? Well, you already have this in your infrastructure. It already happened many years ago when your industry your company moved from the fax to the emails. You have adopted the new server in your IT infrastructure that enable each one of you to exchange emails with other counterparties. And what we foresee is that there will be a moment very, very soon where next to your email server, you will have a B3I node that is enabling you to exchange contracts, not just messages.
Thanks, Antonio. Aris, I just wanted to ask you, could you, obviously, Antonio's given us a broad overview of how things work in the network, but actually, how does DLT help reinsurance contracts themselves and interactions? Could you give us a little bit of insight there?
Indeed, you can see, you know, there are plenty of you know, powerful features from blockchain, and all of them are extremely useful for making it easier to administer reinsurance contracts, and I would say in general to transfer risk. One of the key benefits, I would say, for reinsurance is around contract certainty, right? And it's about having clarity and agreement on the terms among parties from inception. And it's not unheard of currently, you know, for deals to be signed and then the full details to be shared later. But having the single shared version of the truth that Antonio mentioned, you know, the digital contract, which is, you know, created by consensus from all the participants, it means that the contract certainty is inherent part of the process. You don't have to worry about it later to achieve it later. Also, since the data is distributed across the network to all participants instantaneously as it changes, there's less scope for errors. It means better data quality. And then if you think about the fact that reinsurance is a highly regulated industry, where of course auditability is very important, the fact that the ledger is immutable and information cannot be tampered with and is secured, it means that you end up with a complete and transparent audit trail. But I would agree also with Antonio that the real value is from B3I's infrastructure that enables all these market participants, that you can see on the right side, the brokers, the cedents, the reinsurers, to transact on this trusted and secure network, right? And of course, the more firms that are involved in the network, the more these benefits of the blockchain are maximized.
Thanks, Aris. Thank you. And James, lastly, again, we've talked again about the way users can apply the technology, but how does this apply to insurance and reinsurance? Is a very relationship-based industry. We have a point here about it being a natural network. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on from directly from Aris there, what we've found, speaking directly to customers and shareholders, is that blockchain in itself does provide powerful features. It's a really interesting piece of technology. For us, when speaking to our customers and shareholders, it's much more been an enabler, because you are removing this need for a centralized authority or a dependence on a centralized authority. You're removing this assumption that somebody's going to own and control the data. And then that's been a massive enabler to enable some of the biggest reinsurers, insurers, and brokers to come around a table and discuss how to solve the common problems for the market. That's the first thing I would say. For me, a non-technical person, this technology is an enabler as opposed to the direct solving the individual problems. Specifically on your question, Brett, around is it a natural ecosystem? So insurance is an ecosystem. It's what it does, and it does it through way of risk transfer. What we do know is that there's a massive underutilization of this network, and there's a massive reduction and sometimes a destruction of value between insurers, reinsurers, and brokers. There's an enormous amount of rework. There's an enormous amount of lost data. There's an enormous amount of processing conducted by every single person in the transaction. And what that does is destroy value. So for me, insurance using blockchain or distributed ledger is the perfect enabler to start really maximizing the value of these networks.
That's really useful, James. That does help, I guess, put the two together. Why blockchain, why DLT, and what can it offer me? I think that's the point. That's the reason why we chose it. Antonio says there are other ways, but this is the reason why we've chosen this one in order to help that. I can see questions coming in, so thank you very much. And we will get to those at the end of the session. So please keep them coming in. And I can already tell you that we will have answers for these because I already know what those answers are. So into the next segment. Now this is the real meat of the section. We've positioned, the pain points at the start, and then we've sort of gone to what the technology is, how we think it can be fixed, but what does a real solution look like? And this is why we have our experts on the line with us, because they're going to take us through several different pieces. So we're just going to follow along. So what does a real solution look like? And then we'll start with how does a real solution work? I'm going to hand over to Antonio.
Yes, thanks, Red. For the interest of everyone, as B3I, we started looking in reinsurance. First of all, because we find it much more interesting in the sense of, for the scope of what reinsurance does. It's a risk transfer, but it's a massive risk transfer that occurs every year. But of course, we had a very early and newborn technology in our hands, and we choose excess of loss reinsurance for two reasons. The first one is the materiality of the transactions, big premiums, big capitals. And the second is the frequency, the fact that we in the excess of loss world, we don't see the millions of transactions that usually are typical of facultative business or primary insurance. If we look at commercial insurance or even retail insurance, and with that, if we reverse engineer the pain points that we have highlighted, we are focused in developing initially just an application to see whether the technology really allows the development of an application that could solve problems. And this is part of the, now I can say it, of the history of B3I, because the constitutions of the consortium and the shareholders and all the members that have been working with B3I acknowledged that that was actually a solution that was bringing value. And they gave us the mandate to move forward. But now, what I said in the beginning is the mission of B3I is to enable the industry to transform, to create this transformation path, to bring the industry at the into the 4.0 club. Can we do this just with a single application? A single application that is enabling the placement and the management of the full life cycle management of a reinsurance agreement between many parties. Even me, it sounds stupid to me. So that it doesn't work, right? It's impossible to conquer this type of objective with a single application. And the strategy in B3I is actually different. So allow me to give you one statement and an example. Every single company we work with is part of our ecosystem today, uses a different system. Even if they're buying the system from the same vendor, admin system, is a different instance. It may look like the same, it may have the same name, but behind is different. And that gives to everyone the answer. It's impossible to basically transform the industry with a single application. There must be something else. There must be a different way. And what no one of those companies has is a dedicated infrastructure to enable the interoperability, a true interoperability amongst all the parties. And when I speak about interoperability, I mean automated interoperability. And that's where the infrastructure comes. And that's where the network becomes the most important pillar of our strategy, establishing the network, creating a protocol that enables multiple parties to execute transactions, regardless of what is the underlying system that they are using, but they can communicate. An example is, first of all, when every one of us sends an email today, I don't think that anyone cares if the other party is using Outlook or Yahoo or the Gmail, the Google system. No one cares. You don't care about what is the client. There is a protocol behind that is guaranteeing that to whoever you receive, you send an email, the email is received and is processed and it can be replied. But similarly, it applies to the mobile technology. Whenever you place a phone call, you don't care if the other counterpart, the other party you are calling, it's actually using the very same brand as your phone or even the very same operating system as what you're using. There is a protocol behind that is a network protocol that is guaranteeing the communication, guaranteeing interoperability amongst lots of different types of applications and phones and end user. And this part is that, it's the first layer that lives on top of our network, which is called the risk transfer language. Now, the network, the risk transfer language. And with those two elements, we have developed an application that is our lighthouse, is an example of what can be done. But the reality is that we are not aiming to distribute this application globally. We want to enable other counterparties to integrate their own system into the network and inheriting this technology in the infrastructure that they already have in place. Remember that B3I is an initiative that is by the market for the market. And so imagine if all the interested parties came to B3I and says, okay, from tomorrow we revamp all our IT infrastructure. That's crazy, impossible. Everyone has an interest to extend the life cycle of the system, transforming the system and making them capable of embracing a new level of technology without the need of revamping everything and reinvesting again in order to embrace, in order to work properly.
So, Antonio, you obviously just talked about risk transfer language there. This common language to facilitate interoperability between applications and across the network. You didn't touch on data protocols. Could you do that?
Yes, of course. That's part of the risk transfer protocol that we have developed also as part of our fluidity platform. And those are the two dimensions that guarantees that a distributed ledger technology, which is a general purpose technology, becomes capable of supporting the establishment of a reinsurance agreement. Now, in that case, I would extend a little bit the meaning of data protocols, because it's a risk transfer protocol, which means in order to reach a binding moment where a specific agreement is defined, there are a number of steps that you need to reach. You have to be able to publish your FOT to the industry. You need to collect written lines, and you have to execute your signing according to the parameters that have been defined by the reinsurers, right? They may define a line to stand, so you have to be able to sign down within the range that has been set by the reinsurer, and that's part of the risk transfer protocol. And once the contract is bound, the contract is marked as a real legally binding entity amongst the parties, and the contract is defined following the rules and all the domain model that we have defined into the risk transfer language. Because, and I conclude, let's be reminded, a network, an infrastructure, a network is nothing without a language that enable several entities to communicate. It is pretty much like if in this call I switch to Italian and Aris is Greek and James that is British, they will start speaking their own language. We will not be able to understand each other. We will hear each other, of course, but we will not be able to transfer information because we're speaking a different language in that case.
Right, and that's what you're talking
exactly.
Here. Exactly.
Exactly.
So, do you just want to talk to this really quickly, just to explain, because we covered quite a lot in here, the RTL,
yes.
Interoperability. I just want to be able to give the audience a little bit of visibility on this slide.
Yeah, that's exactly, it covers exactly what I just mentioned, which is the need from B3I to becoming an enabler rather than the application that exists in the market. We have been founded with this type of vision, being by the market, for the market, and enabling this transformation process. And this is bound in the concept of B3I fluidity. And B3I fluidity can be interpreted as a kind of a distributed operating system. It's like the iOS that lives on the iPhones, right? It's the platform that not only enables multiple applications to interoperate, and guaranteeing that whenever you're transferring a contract from one application to another, there is consistency, there is certainty, you're not losing information, that they can interpret the contract in the very same way. But it's also a platform that gives to the IT industry a library of features that B3I has already developed. And that means that every time IT vendors will need to develop an application for the insurance or reinsurance industry, they will not need to reinvent the wheel every single time. They can exactly start from what B3I has already developed, and they can focus on really creating the value for the customer rather than investing in establishing the infrastructure, defining all the protocols, and all the architectural part that in this technology consumes a lot of effort. I'd say that 80% of the B3I focus has been on the network and the platform, 20% on the application. And imagine if every single vendor that needs to enable this type of applications to insurers has to do the same. It will consume an enormous amount of capital. So what if the investment on the infrastructure is done once? What if the platform is established once? It means that made 100% the investment need to develop an application, a software provider can actually focus the entirety of that on the application level, on the value for the customer, and enabling true innovation.
Perfect, thank you, Theo. I think it was really important to cover off how does a real solution work in a simplified manner like this, just to show the underlying technology that's working there. And this is part of the B3I vision. But I want to hand over to Aris now in terms of what does a real solution need? And we're going to use the example of B3I Reinsurance, our product that Aris is the product owner for. So Aris, if I can hand across to you, try and put this product in context of the network, but also help people understand what this is trying to achieve, how it's fixing a broken market.
Exactly. So Antonio talked about the network, about the infrastructure, about the risk transfer language, and B3I Reinsurance is really a first application allowing the market participants to end-to-end manage their insurance treaties. We sometimes call it our lighthouse product because it also illustrates what's possible, and we do want to also have other parties, vendors building on top of this platform. And we talk, of course, about the single version of the truth, which includes everything from the data, the messages, the contracts, because the main thing is that it eliminates the need for reconciliation, right? And it's important also to note here one aspect, that this single version of the truth is only available to the relevant parties, right? That is the participants of a contract and potentially the regulator or an auditor. So these parties have control on what is being shared. The other important element of the application is the ability to define complex contract structures. We sometimes call them treaty towers. These can involve multiple layers and sections, and they may have scope coverage that includes multiple inclusions and exclusions. They may also have reinstatements defined, and of course details around the premium information and the installments. So having these terms encoded and structured, and also as executable computer code, it's also helping along realizing the straight-through processing potential in the industry. And if you move also to the next slide, where we show that besides being able to digitize the contract, the application is also designed to reflect the workflows used in the industry. We all know there are interactions between the broker, the cedent, and the reinsurers around requesting quotes, around negotiating and finalizing the terms. And by the way, I've seen already a question around whether these terms can be customized for a specific reinsurer, and that's possible. All the way to having signed contracts and even endorsed contracts. So all of this information and all of this interaction can take place directly in the application without having to switch context, which is very important. And since there are also from all these interactions, there are multiple contracts being created, the application provides an overview of these contracts and the state they're in. Now, and finally, I want to mention the, in the beginning, the end-to-end, management of reinsurance of this application. So it's not just about the placement, right? There is also the technical accounting module where the accounting information is generated directly from the digital contract. So again, there is no need for reconciliation because the shared view is maintained by the system. Now, our vision, of course, is for reinsurance to be conducted in a blockchain native world where changes are cascaded across connected parties and applications on the ledger. But until then, we appreciate there are applications and systems that are used in the market. So we offer also APIs for integrating with them. And if we look at the next slide, because there was also a question around, the roadmap. So we see where we stand with B3I Re 2.0 scheduled for the third quarter. But we also want to expand to additional contract and reinsurance types. There was a question in the Q&A. That includes, of course, proportional, non-proportional treaties. And we also want to implement a claims management module. You can imagine, of course, having this shared view, again, the single version of the truth, along with smart contracts, it can really help automate claims processing and is very well also suited for specific products like parametric insurance, for example, where the claims compensation is triggered by external events and inputs like weather data. And to close this, I'd like to say that where we got here is really by listening to the customer, and that includes the underwriters, the reinsurance managers, the brokers, the technical accountings, and James is going to also talk more about how we are shaping this in an iterative way.
Thank you, Aris. I think just a recap on this. I think this is our real solution. This is the product we're implementing. It is live. You can do all these things. I could really see questions that we're going to come to at the end, where I think there's a good amount of discussion. I think one of the ones, just to reiterate and reinforce here, is the end-to-end ability of this. Adding the technical accounting is one of those big steps towards achieving that. And that's where we think the real value is for a lot of people. We've obviously shared with you the roadmap. And I'll go into some more detail there, because there is a date here on Q3 2020. So some things are happening very soon that we would love to share with you, and I'll do that at the end. I'm just going to hand over to James for this final slide as to how has it become a real solution.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the greatest power of B3I is not only its shareholder base, but also the individuals that work with us. So the application that we've designed for the management of reinsurance contract has been designed and delivered in partnership with experts in the market. You've got some statistics up on the screen there, and a good statistic, a good number for me is the number 85. We've managed to establish 2 working groups this year, and manage 3 working groups with about 85 experts from the market, covering claims, reinsurance, accounting, and underwriting. And that's something we're enormously proud of. The ability to work with experts across the market in multiple different countries, in multiple different continents, and design and deliver an application that the market wants and needs. And that's something that really does set B3I apart from other initiatives or other software suppliers. We have a really, really strong mandate to do all the cool things that Antonio was talking about on a network and an infrastructure level, but also at a very pragmatic application level. We're working with people across the market, and that's something for me, that's something that's very fun, but it's something that's much more powerful. We need to make something that creates value for the market to enable the market to adopt it. Just picking up quite quickly on one of the questions that was asked around brokers. So brokers are rightfully investing in a range of different applications and placement platforms. No doubt a number of you use those during your day-to-day life. And as Antonio said previously, we're not here to try to monopolize the placement market, placement platform market. It's not at all what we're doing. We use this as an entry into the market to start to digitalize insurance contracts on DLT. But we're really pragmatic. We are working with our brokers as part of these working groups, as well as looking at opportunities to integrate with their placement platforms, again, taking a centralized form of data structure and putting it onto B3I's distributed ledger network that brings a huge amount of benefits across the market. Just final point on the working groups. We will continue to establish new working groups as we move into additional contract types and additional functionality. And a big message from me is, look, you don't need to be a shareholder, you don't need to be a customer. All you need to be is someone that's super interested in change, interested in technology, and want to help us make a difference. So please get in touch and come and work with us in any of these working groups to help us deliver something that you value and is important for the market.
And it's also fun.
Yes.
It's very fun.
Thank you, James. I was just going to say, I think that's a really important underlying message by the market. For the market, that's always what we've lived and breathed. And everything you've seen here today are things that are current and are currently happening. So we're going to move into the Q&A section. I've already seen a couple of questions I want to pitch to our panel. The first one here is, it's also already great to see people agreeing that reinsurance admin is broken. So that's step one taken care of. But realistically, the first question I have is the technology designed to cover end to end of a contract? I think maybe Aris, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, absolutely. So as we mentioned, so we began with the placement of the contract. So starting with the negotiation, with the requesting of the quotes, all the way to the signing. And that also doesn't stop there. So that includes, of course, changes that may happen later to the contract. So that means endorsements. That also would include, of course, renewals, because most of these contracts are repeating business. And as I mentioned, besides the placement is also the technical accounting module, and of course the claims, which is coming next. So it is really the end-to-end management. It's not focusing on just one piece, because we feel that what this platform is enabling is that, once you have this digital representation of the contract, you can then more easily work with this single version of the truth.
Perfect. So in short, yes.
In short, yes.
Yeah. So I've got a question.
Even the commutation, by the way, right? Sorry if I'm interrupting. Even the commutation, it's something we have briefly looked into it, and the technology enables that as well. So we haven't, at the moment, we haven't seen any case for that, of course, but it's not a common case, but that's something that is possible.
Yeah, I think something that's important is the roadmap we shared with you. It's an iterative process. We're always adding to this. That's one of the reasons for the working groups. It's finding those challenges that need to be handled first and managing them as we go through. But yes, end to end is the ultimate goal. I have a question here. This is quite a broad question, but I'll put it to you, Antonio. Does B3I fully resolve extensible technical / business / regulatory rules?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where is the question so that I can read it?
No problem. It's in the,
okay.
It's in the Q&A.
I would say this is a journey, not just, a deliverable. Those are some of the principles we move along. And whenever we have to take decisions, and whenever we have to set strategy, and whenever we have to define how to solve a specific problem, we look at what are the technology, the technical, the business, and the regulatory rules. And at the moment, we resolve all of them because we are moving along those lines. We are not revolutionizing yet, okay? The current scope of what we develop is evolutionary. So we are evolving the status quo. We are not moving really fast away from the status quo. Because at the end, we need to take into consideration that the reinsurance industry, despite you will see the energy we have in B3I and the willingness to change it and change it fast, is highly regulated. And it's highly regulated for a specific reason, because it needs to give certainty. Now, the transformation process that we are enabling is a path, and it's a path that moves exactly along those boundaries. And what we have seen is that, regulators are very interested in what we're doing because of the role that they can play in that infrastructure, and because of the impact that this could have on their activity and increasing their capability of monitoring much more closely how the industry is moving. So long story short, yes, we are resolving the rules, and we are moving along those.
Thank you. I know that was a very big open question. I've even heard it said before, theorized, would GDPR be an issue if blockchain hadn't, or DLT hadn't existed several years ago because of immutable data, etc., and the sharing of selected counterparties? So I think it's a really interesting subject. I want to move on to a little bit.
Just before we do, sorry, Reg, can I just jump in a couple of those points, some practical examples on the technical side. What the last couple of years we've really achieved is to take blockchain and put it directly into the business. It's like an enterprise stage. We've gone from something that was very theoretical into something that's very, very practical. And a little plug for B3I. One of their services is the ability to offer a node as a service. So the ability for a company to establish a node in the B3I environment, and that will be hosted and delivered completely by B3I and can be built within a matter of hours at very, very low expense. So that's one point just on the technical side. On the rules side, and just to align it with another question that came in, was around what's your approach on signing down. Now, the signing down process is a legally binding process. It's the stamping process where you deploy your capacity and enter into the contract. And for us, there's two things. Like, number one is, okay, what is the business's perspective? So maybe the business you work for wants you to print something, to stamp it, to sign it. Can we overcome that? Well, yeah, definitely. If we work together and we establish good working practices, business can certainly move beyond stamps and wet ink. The other part to it would be the regulator's perspective, the legal perspective. And this stuff is really, really emerging. So there are no rules or there are no legal positions around digital signatures on DLT. So it's something that we need to establish. And again, it's a big benefit of the structure of B3I. So we're working with our shareholders to understand the regulatory framework they operate and try to deliver a solution that meets the regulatory framework, or potentially moving and start to lobby or start to influence the direction of the regulation to make sure things can be done digitally.
Perfect. Thank you for that, James. That's really good insights as well on the signing down in particular. We have a question here. I think this came in before we did the roadmap slide, but Antonio, could you talk a little bit around some of the things that are coming up, new lines of business, etc.?
Yes, of course we are. You know, our direction it's set by the market, by our customers, by the members that have been using the application last year during the parallel run and have been, you know, in love with it, and they have been participating in this year development to define the scope of the release that is coming on the 14th of September. We aim to cover, you know, the depth and breadth of the reinsurance, and in terms of contract types, in terms of lines of business, in terms of specific behaviors, if there are special or specific workflows that are executed. As I said, you know, we are focused on the protocol side. Of course, when you develop an infrastructure which is first of its kind, you need also to show what type of applications can run on it, and we will be enriching the protocol as the customer requires to be enriched. That's our mission. You know, if I can put it in short, we want to make underwriters' life much easier, and we would like to transform the work of the accountants in being more reporting and managerial on numbers rather than hunters, because they are the hunters of the policy or the insurance number, where the specific money that they receive is actually allocated, and they need to make sure that this is resolved in order to unfreeze some cash that was there waiting in the bank account. So we move along the needs of the market, and we already have a pipeline of features that, while we were developing B3I Re 2.0 and executing all the testing sessions with the members, not only we were capturing feedbacks for those features, but we were capturing new requirements for the next release. And you know, a point I'd like to raise to the attendees here is the way we work and the way B3I delivers. We have, as I said, the mission is to satisfy the need of underwriters and accountants and claims managers, and we have very short cycles of delivery. So it means that by the time you ask for a feature, maybe we have already developed it in a certain way, and we are already there to satisfy that need, because we are by the market, for the market, and we want to represent that accelerator. While if we look at what is the evolution of admin systems, some of you that are in the call may wonder some of those systems are actually quite old. What is the evolution? Is this the legacy of the industry, the fact that it becomes very difficult to update and upgrade those solutions? That's something that we want to unbound, and we want to ensure that we can push the industry, embracing the speed at which technology evolves as well. And this goes back to the point that James raised. If we have a need at any level of new risk transfer to be enabled, new type of coverages, new products, the industry must respond. But the more we advance in time, the more that response will need to come from a technology perspective. Because everything that we see around us is moving from a technology standpoint, and there is a technology demand. If the industry will not be able to respond with a technology answer, that would put us in a difficult position.
Thank you, Antonio. I've just had one more here that I've seen. Why can't I just use APIs to exchange data with my counterparties?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a good one. Yes, you can, but who gives you the certainty that the data that you're transferring through the API remains the same? You know, you can transform it. You can transform it into your database. So the APIs, it's a plug where you can extract data. But who is giving you the certainty that the data that you have extracted hasn't been transformed into your system? DLT is different. DLT brings you the data with certainty in your database. So you own the truth. If you, in a certain way, try to change the data in your database, generating a misalignment between what you have and what the other parties that are involved in that contract have, this basically will invalid the specific transaction and notify everyone that there is a misalignment so that you can ensure that the alignment is reached again. So this is just my personal opinion. I think APIs have been good, but each single company has its own APIs. Every single insurance or reinsurance, they have their own set of APIs. Who will be the broker or the customer happy to integrate with one whenever they move to another, they have to change the endpoints, the data point, to change the validations and everything. Connecting to each single set of APIs is valid if you are transacting an enormous amount of data with that one, if you want to stay. So please, guys, have a look at the open banking world. They are standardizing APIs as well. And that's the way to go, having a standard set of APIs. The industry must be accessible, must be open. But on the other side, the industry must also be certain. We are not just exchanging data. We are qualifying contracts. We are qualifying commitment. So having a standardized set of APIs, that's what the infrastructure, the fluidity platform brings. Having the certainty that the data that is exchanged there is certain and contract valid, and persistent and immutable, that's what the DLT brings. So APIs are valid, and those APIs, it's also something that B3I has, that's the way to access, is a general definition, the way to access data and interact with IT. But in the sense and in the common sense of how the industry is looking at APIs today, in that way, unfortunately, they don't work. And maybe we haven't reached that level of interpretation yet, but it will be there. As B3I, we have a privilege that we can see beyond some of those evolution and understand exactly where where things are evolving. And we have seen that we need a different approach.
Thank you. I'm glad we got to answer that question. I have a long one here from Paul Krisman. How do you convince, get past barriers with decision makers with this sort of technology? James, you've talked about the cost saving side of this sort of stuff. And Antonio, you've talked about the development of technology in this area. I wonder if there's a common answer between those two.
Yeah, so this was in terms of the decision makers at, for example, our shareholder businesses. Yeah, in that context. Okay. It's difficult, right? This industry is got an enormous amount of heritage, legacy, some very, very good people that have done jobs in broadly the same way for a number of years. So what we are trying to do here is ultimately change some behaviours. And it's not easy. Again, coming back to the power of B3I, the fact that shareholders and customers influence the direction of our application and our direction of our technology really helps, because they've got a vested interest to make sure that it's the best it can be and to adopt. But it's definitely not easy. Change management is tough. Transformation is tough, but the way in which Aris, Antonio and his team design this software is to make adoption very, very easy. Customers can access the B3I via a node and access the application on a URL with a simple login. So it's all to do with accessibility, with plenty of difficult, challenging legal conversations along the way. But this is the nature of change. It will just take some time.
Right. Antonio, Aris, any final words on the presentation as a whole today? Because we're going to have to start wrapping this up. We have some outgoing messages as well.
Yes, just a message from me. We haven't been able to answer all the questions. So what we will be doing is picking all the questions that were raised today and publishing them one by one on LinkedIn with our answers. And please join the discussion, because I think it's worthwhile. We are in a world where we cannot, unfortunately, if you look back at can you go one slide back, please, Red? I think this type of event will be far from in the next months. We will not be able to create those type of gatherings, but the real energy and the exchange of ideas and the exchange of opinions led B3I to achieve what we have today. And I think this is fundamental. And we will be publishing those questions. Please participate, please join, please contribute, because every single contribution represents for us a small step we move forward. It means a lot for us, because it gives to us more colors to the picture. It allows us to interpret much better the complexity of the industry, and the perspective of every single professional in the industry is fundamental for us, because it's a human-led industry, and it will be a human-driven industry for the next 100 years. This is not going to change. What is going to change is the effort humans are putting into the admin.
Thank you, Antonio. And all that leaves me to say is thank you everyone who's joined us today. If you'd like to get in touch with the team, please do so via sales@b3i.tech. In addition, we'll also be reaching out to all the attendees and signups that we've had today, because we're having a further event on the 14th of September. So mark that in your diaries, and we'll provide more information about that around B3I Reinsurance product itself. It should be an exciting session there. You'll get to hear from John Carolyn, B3I CEO, and Antonio de Marzo again on this specific product. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Looking forward to hear from you.